And Dave Sussman back with you at America's Voice News, and I'm delighted to have with us Brent Bozell, the Media Research Center. You've seen him all over Fox News and all other publications, newspapers, and generally talking about the media and frankly how one-sided we're seeing the media has been for years, but especially in the past couple of years. This week we saw whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram deplatforming conservatives. What's going on right now in the era of free speech or lack thereof?
It's the era of intolerance. You've got three kinds of media. You've got the old media, which was the networks, newspapers, magazines, and the like. Then you had new media, which was websites, blogosphere, talk radio, and that sort of stuff. And now you've got social media, which is the newest form, which is direct conversation. I think conservatives posed a real threat to the tech companies because conservatives were starting to dominate social media with tens of millions of people on a regular basis. And what you've got is Palo Alto saying this will not stand and we're not going to allow it on our platforms. So they've come up with all manner of different ways of playing the game to try to lump reputable conservative organizations around a handful of real clickbait organizations, which by the way exist on the left as well. So you have Facebook is a great example of this. Facebook says it's the open marketplace of ideas, but they've got 15,000 employees now monitoring content. They've got rule books 1,400 pages long and 500 pages devoted to the word hate, which is all about conservatives. So there's a real intolerance taking place. There's real censorship taking place, and it's all of them. It is them, it's Twitter, it's Google, it's YouTube, and now you got the service companies. Now you've got Microsoft involved with their NewsGuard feature where they give a green light or a red light to that organization depending on what they want to do. You've got PayPal deciding who it won't service with credit card application. They won't do some Christian groups. They won't do Act for America, Brigitte Gabriel's group. You've got Apple. Apple is avidly raising money for the SPLC. Chase Bank won't process credit cards for gun rights organizations. So you're starting to see their service companies as well getting into the act. This is dangerous because it's not in the United States. This is worldwide. And when you start talking about worldwide censorship, you're talking the greatest threat to freedom worldwide in the history of man.
You talk about companies as huge as Facebook and Silicon Valley. They are just massive. They're underpinning, you're talking about billions of users, okay? They've created these algorithms. So when you see right-of-center people this week of Paul Joseph Watson or Laura Loomer or other folks that are out there that have been considered marginalized by mainstream media, a lot of people will say, well, that's only because the algorithms are now kicking in. It's not individuals sitting down at Facebook and just picking and choosing victims. Do you agree with that?
Not exactly. You've got Google. I mean, I have visited with executives of Google who say you can't manipulate the algorithmic data on there. They testified that you can't manually play with their algorithms. But in fact, they have been playing manually with their algorithms. Daily Caller called them out on it and caught them. So they are tinkering with these things, and I think it is very dangerous. They will look at a couple of far-right groups, and they will lump many people into it once they get the slippery slope going. But interestingly enough, finally, after we said for months, why was Louis Farrakhan still on there? They barred him, but the left is now calling him a right-wing figure.
Yeah.
So it's always the right.
Is it? I know.
Next they'll finally get around to barring Antifa or Black Lives Matter, and when they do, they'll probably accuse them of being right-wing groups.
Right-wing groups as well. Is this just stupidity at a low level at Washington Post or whoever said that Farrakhan is right-wing?
That was CNN. No, it's not stupidity.
What is it?
That is, look, what's happening in the press today is deliberate with absolutely no semblance of any devotion to objectivity, or in many cases to truth. They believe ends justify the means. They have become radicalized. You don't hear anyone in the news media defending themselves as objective.
Right.
They're not even trying anymore. Their goal is to take down Donald Trump individually, and then the conservative movement collectively. I've never seen anything like it. It started about 5 years ago. I've seen nothing like this in my lifetime.
Okay, you and Media Research Center have been around for a long time. I remember in the early 90s when Herbert Walker Bush was running for re-election and Clinton was on the ticket. I remember seeing a pickup truck and at the back it said, "Don't believe the liberal media." There's always been a perception of liberal bias in the media. But where has this come from today, where you've seen in the past 5 years that you just stated that it is mushroomed into what we're seeing right now with this attack on free speech, so to speak?
Well, thanks for the plug. That was our bumper sticker.
That was yours.
It was ours.
Wow.
Our campaign has been ours. I think this is the media. I agree with Rush. The media are the leaders of the Democratic Party, not the other way around. The media are what decides what is and isn't acceptable on the far left. Look at the media's support of AOC.
Right.
This is a fringe gas bag of a bartender. I mean, just think what Daniel Webster must be thinking with this girl in the White House, and yet you've got the media serving her all this gravitas. I think they've become so weaponized that in a way it's gone to their heads. Who would have thunk that today I might be pining for the good old days of Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather and the late Peter Jennings? But when you look at all their biases, and they were hard liberal bias, I'll take them any day over what's today, because then it was bias, now it's censorship. Then it was debate, and it was twisting facts a little bit. Now it's outright lying. Then it was wanting to win the argument. Now it's wanting to destroy. So
how do we get here? We're at AFA, American Freedom Alliance today. We're talking about the march through the institutions by the left. How did we get to this point?
I think it's social media. I think that if you didn't have social media, if you were still where you were before social media, look, the media were completely marginalized at the time, and I think they still are. And here's the interesting thing: in 2016, 91% of the American people believed that the news media were out to get Donald Trump. That means the Democrats also believed it. So people say to me, well, how well are you doing if the media are more liberal than ever before? It's never been how liberal they are. The question is, how believed are they? When you look at social media, you've also seen a huge backlash. Interestingly enough, the last 3 presidential campaigns were all decided by social media. Mm-hmm. Obama won with Facebook, both of his campaigns, and Trump won with Twitter. So people who say social media doesn't have power, think 3 times about that one. So what happened? If you look at the polling data, after constant 90, 91, 92% negative coverage, never seen this in history, month after month after month after month, almost unanimous negative coverage, no matter how well the economy is doing. Trump's numbers have gone up.
We hear a lot about, because of the Mueller report, Russia, although there was no collusion with this administration now, we know that, but they did have an involvement in pushing the narrative through using social media in the 2016 election. Do you fear that? Are you concerned about it from a media research standpoint about how that's going to impact 2020?
Yeah, I am, but I don't think that they played any role in 2016. The last I heard it was $200,000 of digital ads.
Right.
That's going to affect politics for about 14 seconds these days. So no, I don't think they had an impact. However, I think they could, and I think they're having an impact in marginalizing the public debate. I think they're throwing gasoline on both sides, on the fires on both sides. I do believe, you're already seeing it. There've already been evidence of these fringe things that have been set up.
Right.
So they're doing it. They're causing trouble. God only knows who else is doing this. I just hope our side's doing it to them.
Well, there's certainly a lot of folks that are working really, really hard looking at the granular data and how to use that, and it's getting right down into individuals, right, where you live, the block that you live on, and how to get people.
But I tell you how else is working, and this is, conservatives have caught them time and again, where they're using state-of-the-art technology to project things that aren't there. Look at that massive boycott against Rush Limbaugh. With hundreds of thousands of people all over the country outraged by something he did 4 or 5 years ago. Turned out to be 17 people with state-of-the-art technology. Look at the whole Sleeping Giants operation that has cost Breitbart 198 subscribers. It's going after Tucker Carlson. It's going after Laura Ingraham. Again, a massive outpouring of outrage at what they're doing. Turned out it was one person in Germany and one person, I think, here on the West Coast. That's all it was, but state-of-the-art technology. So there's a lot of gamemanship going on in the far left where they're projecting something that just isn't there.
You guys at Media Research, what you guys are taking a look at is obviously bias in the media. This is what you've been doing for years. Another organization that's out there that comes out under the guise of doing what you do, taking a look at bias, is Media Matters. But they are a Soros-funded, Clinton-funded, okay? David Brock runs it. Very, very, very much on the left. What you're talking about, the boycotts, a lot of that stems from a small group of individuals at Media Matters, and then they create this snowball effect on social media. Do you think they have an impact today? And if they have an impact, how does that impact future elections coming up?
Oh, they do. And there is a big difference besides the fact that we're conservative and they are radical left.
Right.
The big difference is we tell the truth and they don't.
I can't even consider you conservative. I consider you mainstream.
I'll call myself a conservative. I'm a conservative.
You personally, but it's right of center.
The data are not.
Right.
The data are not. The research is there. In 32 years, no one's ever called into question a single study we've done. We've done thousands of them. You can't argue the data. We don't make things up. Media Matters was set up, by the way, by Hillary Clinton, funded by George Soros to fight us, to be the answer to us. What they tried these public campaigns, and they really didn't get anywhere because the public wasn't on their side. Then they came up with something very smart, which was feed things to their friends in the national media without their fingerprints on there. So they just fed things to CNN, fed stories to NBC, fed stories to ABC and CBS, and they ran them as objective truth. But it was Media Matters that was funneling them to them. They've done boycotts, and they've been very successful given the money that they have, which is gazillions of dollars from the far left. I mean, that Bush could be successful with the kind of money they have. And so, that's just the reality. The far left is outgunning us financially, probably by a factor of 100 to 1.
100 to 1?
I would say so.
Wow. Last question for you, because I know you're going to be going on here shortly. Journalism, the state thereof. What are we looking at in the future? I talk about this in my show all the time. My son is about to go to college. He wants to go into journalism. Are we seeing will we see an ebb and a flow? It will continue going in this direction that is so concerning to all of us right of center types.
I think we are rapidly leaving the journalism era altogether, and we're going into the information age. If you want something, if you want to know what's going on in Israel today with the attacks from Hamas, you don't wait for the 6:30 news. You reach into your pocket and you find this thing called a cell phone.
Right.
And you pull up the video, and over 50% of all video, whether it's laptops, movies, TVs, desktops, anything, comes on the video on your telephone. So anything you want is on your smartphone, instant information. So the news era, and it does trouble me because I think so much is superficial. It is just rip and read headlines that you're going to get. No one's going deep into the issues. News. Look at the 24-hour news cable networks. I guess you don't have more than an hour and a half of real news on any of them anymore because it's all talk that's going on, which is fine. You and I can have a conversation. but you're not reporting news right now, nor do you think you will.
Who selects the news today?
Leslie Medgley was Walter Cronkite's longtime producer. He had a great line in his book, How Many Words Do You Want? The first half of his book was devoted to the print media. And he said in the print media, the editor says what news is. And then when he went to his career in television, he said, in television, the producer decides what news is. And that's really what it is. There is no such thing as objective news. It doesn't exist.
A lot of people are saying it's coming from the blue verified check marks now on Twitter that are quote-unquote journalists that are talking amongst themselves, and that stems up to become mainstream news.
Do you believe that a woman is not a man?
No.
Huh? Do you believe that a woman is not a man?
Yes. A woman is not a man.
Okay, try saying that on Twitter. You're going to get banned for that.
No, I know that.
There was a professor who was banned for that.
Yeah.
You can't say the words Bruce Jenner without being banned because Bruce is now a dead name. And so you've got to say Caitlyn, or you're banned. This is thought control that's going on. This is a gay agenda, but there are anti-NRA agendas. There's certainly an anti pro-life agenda that's coming in various ones of these. So what they're telling you, and if you pay attention to what Facebook has been saying, they've been saying the European parliamentary government is superior to the constitutional government in the United States. They're also saying the European model that puts virtue first and freedom second, their definition of virtue, is superior to the American model that puts freedom first and virtue second. So understand that when they're looking at things like the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, this is a worldwide company. They don't believe in them. So what do? You shut down speech, First Amendment. You shut down pro-gun groups, Second Amendment, because you don't believe them.
This is scary stuff. This really is.
It's reality.
Yeah.
It's reality.
Yeah. And you see the trajectory. You're optimistic, pessimistic?
I am optimistic. I'm optimistic because I will never lose faith in the American people to make the right moves. And there are some recourses you have. I do believe that you have to look at antitrust legislation. You've got to break these companies up. And by the way, that's a conservative position.
Yeah.
It says you've got to have competition. And you can be try to be competitive with Facebook. Instagram they swallowed them. YouTube tried to compete with Google. Google swallowed them. Apple's got $1 trillion in cash. What are you going to do? If they want something, they get it.
I know I said this was my last question 5 minutes ago, but I have to ask you about this. Do you believe in whether it's trust busting or going in and taking a look at a company like Facebook or a company like Apple or Google, $1 trillion organizations? How does even the free market compete against that?
It doesn't. This is not the free market. This is why the conservative position is antitrust, to allow competition. You don't have a competitive thing. Somebody made a statement. I was on Fox a few weeks ago, and a liberal professor before me, made an observation I hadn't thought about. He said, what would happen if you broke Facebook in half and allowed competition? You would have a rush of capital into the market. You would have people hired by the thousands to have jobs at a new entity if it could only be allowed to compete with Facebook. Same thing with all the other ones.
But isn't that government imposed?
Google. No, it's just the opposite. Google, it's breaking up. Google controls 92.5% of search engines worldwide. How is that competitive? Google, according to a study that was recently completed at Stanford by a non-conservative, Google has the power with its search engine to affect up to 80% of the undecided vote in any election. Now, you think, my friend, how powerful that is. That decides presidential campaigns if they want to pull the lever of the power that they have. So when I look at that, I just say that's too big, too powerful. It's outside the system of government that we have. It's almost like a fourth branch of government. They have got to be stopped. They're too big.
Tell us about Media Research Center.
I formed Media Research Center 32 years ago as a conservative organization. I make no bones about that. But looking at the proposition that you've got a left-wing media that does not project itself for what it is, I believed that if you could tell that story to the American people, you could cause market forces to come forward. Rush started a year after us, and Rush has given us credit for setting the stage for his show. rushed in his show, and Rush has been, think about this, first place for 31 years. This is one of the greatest free enterprise stories in American history, with thousands of people competing against him on radio. He's been number one by far for 31 years. Extraordinary guy too. And I've just I have a new book that's coming out next month, and he doesn't know it, but I dedicated it to him.
Very nice. What's the name of the book?
It's Unmasked: The Media's War on Donald Trump.
Okay.
It's going to be a good one.
And where can folks find Media Research Center?
MRC.org, or our blog site, Newsbusters, or CNS News, or all sorts of other stuff.
Brent Bozell, thank you so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, and good luck with everything you're doing. We'll be right back. And Dave Sussman back with you at American Freedom Alliance, and I'm delighted to be speaking with speaker just fresh off of the stage and a good friend to the show, Bill Whittle. Thanks for returning, Bill. How are you doing?
Great to be here. Good to see you, Bill.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what you just spoke about on stage here, because we're talking about this march through the institutions. One of the things, and I just overheard a person that's saying this to you, but I was thinking about this as well, is that there are so many different ways to complain about what's going on in our society today, but actually to have an initiative and take action and get out there. Talk a little bit about that. What are some of the solutions to this leftist march through the institutions?
Well, the real point of what I'm trying to say is that we win this cultural war. It's already won. It looks like we've lost it, but we've won it. And we've won it because you can't beat the biology out of people. And my entire thesis is really pretty simple. There was a young guy on YouTube who was talking about monetizing videos, and he said if you have a really good video, you might be able to, long format video, you might be able to get people to watch for sometimes 2 or even 3 minutes. And that's when I realized
that's not good news for me.
Well, no, I realized that's so I thought, my God, I thought what everybody else thought. These millennials have no attention span. There's no way to reach them through education. Yeah. And then I realized that these same people who won't watch more than 2 or 3 minutes of an educational video will spend 30 hours playing video games without any stop whatsoever. They'll just play till they drop. So it's not a question of it's not a question of concentration. It's a question of what are they interested in. In other words, they don't have a short attention span. They just have a short attention span for stuff that they don't particularly care for because they've got so many choices. I heard a number today I'd never known before. I think somebody said 300 million hours of content is uploaded to YouTube. Was it every day or every hour? It was just insane.
It boggles the mind.
Unbelievable.
Right.
So they have a choice to watch whatever they want to. So my theory was, okay, what I realized was that more and more millennials are playing more and more computer games every year. And the lightning bolt, which should have hit me a long time ago, was I've been playing computer games since there were computer games, the world's oldest computer gamer.
Pong?
I played on, my first computer game was played on a teletype, just a Star Trek game. But what I realized was this. I've been playing it for 40 years. What actually happens in pretty much every video game ever made? What happens?
Yeah.
All the variations are different, but the goals are the same. Make money and buy weapons. And I realized, hold on, I like to make money and I like to buy weapons, and I'm a conservative. What's going on here? And that's when it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Millennials en masse are spending more and more time in the world of computer games because it gives them a place where they can act like conservatives. They get to drive fast, they get to blow things up, they get to shoot Nazis, all the things that make life worth living. They get to do them in the virtual world because they're not allowed to do them in the real world. Right. Any sign of toxic masculinity, you're a potential rapist, you're a defective girl who can't seem to concentrate. Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't mean to be male, I didn't mean to be white, I didn't mean to be... And rather than fighting it, and they can't fight it in the real world, and you can't expect them to fight it. This is what they've been given by us. So, the bad news is they all vote socialist, but the good news is they've been taught to vote socialist, but the good news is you leave them their own money and their own time, and they go to a place where they get to act like conservatives without being hectored all the time by these shrieking harpies that are ruining their lives.
So how does that convert into actual practice where today you can take the Generation Z and put them in that environment with the idea that can actually relate in their mind to a political ideology?
Well, I've got a plan to do some messaging via, not by making a computer game, but through the medium of computer games, by making science fiction shorts based in the world of computer games. But the more I think about this, the more I realize that while that's important, it's essentially redundant. And what I mean by that is, this generation has been so heavily indoctrinated with leftist beliefs that you would think that if you left these kids alone, they would go into a world of computer games where they would sign petitions and organize movements and have demonstrations, and that's what you would do in computer games. But that's not what they do. They go to a world where they jump out of airplanes and shoot Nazis and cover each other and make a rush for the hill, and supply enfilading fire and suppressing fire. They do this for 30 hours until they can't watch anymore. That's when I realized you can't beat the biology out of people. You cannot force human nature to change. And human nature is on our side. And as I said in there, although Hollywood is as left-wing as they come, entertainment is inherently conservative by its nature. And the proof of that is that no one's ever gone to see a James Bond movie where James Bond confronts a supervillain with a strongly worded letter from the United Nations, then drives off in a Prius at a reasonable speed. That's never happened.
Until the Force became female.
But see, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we talked about Star Wars before.
Right.
The left has understood that while they own the real world and they own the indoctrination of the real world, more and more young people are escaping the real world into the world of computer games or into the world of fandom, which Star Wars is probably the most easy to grasp example. And so what the left has done is they've decided, well, we've got to go into that world and ruin those worlds as well. We can't let them go off and do this. We can't have Luke Skywalker, a young white male, suddenly realize his inherent heroism and rise up with 2 or 3 other bands of individuals to stop this gigantic galactic empire of mind control. You can't have that.
Right.
So The Last Jedi, which was the last of the main sequence Star Wars films, wasn't just a bad movie. The 3 that Lucas made, the prequels, were bad movies. But this movie was designed to undo Star Wars, was designed to disassemble Star Wars.
Right.
Took Luke Skywalker, who was this young, heroic hero for an entire generation, and turned him into a bitter, old, crying, whining murderer who dies for no reason whatsoever. And the fans they're incandescent.
Yeah, you talk about Hollywood, you talk about the movement in culture towards obviously leftism and this idea that, woke, being woke, right? First of all, did you see the latest Marvel Endgame?
I didn't. I know the numbers were huge.
It's going to blow Avatar out of the water eventually as well. My kids loved it. There was only a couple of small woke moments in it where they got all the female heroines together in a couple of scenes, and that was fine, whatever it may be. But it was entertaining, and I was thinking about you because I took my son on premiere night to see it. 2:00 in the morning in the theater. Yeah. Okay, but I was thinking about what you were talking about because I was watching for that, right? Because you just don't you want them to leave the canons alone, so to speak.
Right.
I think Marvel kind of stepped into that with Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel was about this female character, and I don't know what the numbers were, but it sure didn't look like it did very well.
It was a middling effort.
I heard rumors that Disney was buying tickets that it was really, really pretty bad.
Really?
Yeah, but I don't know whether that's true or not. It doesn't matter. What the left has done. See, this is why we've already won. And why on some level we'll always be fighting them, but on some level we'll never lose, because biology is biology. What they did was they said, okay, so we control their minds in the real world. Now we're going to control their hearts in the alternative worlds of movies and video games. So they said that means we need to have strong female characters.
Right.
So let's take Captain Marvel, for example. Let's take Rey from Star Wars, the heroine of the last 3 movies.
Did you see her backflip on the Skywalker? What's it called? Rise of Skywalker trailer?
Yeah, it's making things worse. And the reason that makes things worse is not because millennials are sexist and can't accept strong women. They watched Ripley in Aliens, and they've played, Lara Croft Tomb Raider. It's not that at all.
Right.
It's just that the left, through its laziness and its greed for power, constructs female characters who have it all instantly. And there's a term for that, and that term is a Mary Sue. It comes from somebody who wrote some person, it may have been a gag, but they wrote a little piece of Star Trek fan fiction about Ensign Mary Sue on board the Enterprise, who knew how to do this and do that, and she saved this and did this, and she did it all in like 10 minutes, and then she's tragically killed. She had all the powers that were available to anybody at all the time, period. And that's what Captain Marvel is, and that's
she
what
must have
Rey
been
is.
wearing a red shirt.
She was an interesting character, Dave, because Rey is a Mary Sue, And what angers Star Wars fans, and this is why the left is going to continue to lose. What angers Star Wars fan about Rey is not that it's a woman. It's just that she's never flown a spaceship before. She jumps into the Millennium Falcon, and she flies much better than Han Solo. Right. She hasn't had any training of any kind. Luke had to go spend weeks, years, with training with Yoda, and she picks up a lightsaber for the first time and basically defeats the ace force of evil with a lightsaber she's never held before. And since there's no cost to her skills, there's no value to them either. Yeah. And so Captain Marvel drops in, and she's a woman who's a fighter pilot, and she's just a badass, and she has all these magical powers, and she never suffers, she never loses. There's no setbacks, there's no turnarounds, no backsliding, nothing. And people wonder why they're not interested in characters like that. And it becomes more and more obvious that this is a bludgeon that's being used on these millennials who didn't ask for this world. They didn't ask for a world where they would be given a prize for everything. They didn't ask for a world where they don't keep score in soccer. Mm-hmm. They didn't ask for any of this. But they can tell when somebody's lying to them and manipulating. I mean, as we talked about in that other segment, who shot Han,
Right.
Who shot first, rather, right. is evidence to them that the powers that be will lie about things they saw with their own eyes in order to get them to believe what they want.
Can I turn to politics real quick with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're on the eve. What a lot of people are now reporting is that the FISA, still dossier, it's going to be released. It's going to be. What are we seeing here? Are we going to be seeing John Kerry? Are we going to be seeing McCabe? Are we going to be seeing these guys hauled into Congress here?
I've been waiting for the rule of law to return to America for a long time now. Yeah. And I keep waiting for it, and I keep getting disappointed. So I had, for the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, I had this vision that I would see Jeff Sessions appear in front of the Capitol with forklifts and pallets full of indictments and evidence and stuff. And I didn't see any progress on that front. I think Barr's made out of different stuff. But what I do think is that this attack on Barr, in terms of he lied about this and he's really it's what they do. It's prepping the battlefield, and they're discrediting Barr so that if Barr actually does bring genuine indictments against the people who actually committed these crimes, like Hillary and all the rest of them, then Barr will already be discredited as a liar and a partisan and a hack who Trump is using the shield of executive power to cover for. So that's what they're doing. Whether that means there's going to be any kind of justice served, I don't know. I wish I wasn't so cynical about this. But I am, and again, the reason that this whole millennials and video games thing gives me so much, and Star Wars and fandom too, is that no matter how much you try to pump these ideas into young people's heads, they're still drawn to being heroes. They're drawn to having a code of conduct, which is the Jedi Order. They're drawn to heroism and individual action, and you can't bleach that out of them. Although what we're seeing in Washington is just not just Washington, the whole world. It never ceases to amaze me, which is why the computer game world is a much more real place than the world we live in. In the computer game world, you're either a male or a female, at least when it comes to running an Olympics, and you don't have an individual like Caster Semenya, who beat I think in the 400 meter run, won by 2 seconds, not 2/10 of a second, 2 seconds. Some race she did recently, and they're having discussions about how much testosterone she should be allowed to have in her bloodstream, and there was a talk about having her take testosterone-reducing drugs. And somewhere buried at the very, 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 very bottom of this was the statement that she has X and Y chromosomes, which is the biological definition of being a male. That's all there is to it. It's you're one or the other. Gender, sexual attraction, all of that stuff that's a spectrum. That's fine, but any cell in your body can be taken and determine whether you're male or female.
Okay, so to paraphrase the latest Marvel movie, what's the end game on that? I mean, where do they want to take that?
I think the end game is that this philosophy of progressivism eats itself because it has to. It's predicated on the idea of victimhood, and ultimately that means a pyramid, and ultimately that means there's only one victim.
What's their end game in their mind, Bill? What,
Well, their
what
end
is it that
game in
they
their mind.
want?
Well, what they want is they want to do what they're doing now: put billions of dollars into movies, make people think that they want to become socialists, spend billions of dollars on political campaigns and media matters and all the rest of it, and especially spend a lot of time and effort suppressing people like you and me to make sure our message doesn't get out. And this used to have me absolutely terrified, but I don't worry about it anymore. Because what I've seen is a full court press of these progressive ideals and a generation that simply will run away from them and not fight them. So the left's idea of an end game is when we control all of the information and we control all of the entertainment and we're able to inculcate our ideas into everybody, then we'll have won. If we can shut up all the conservatives and if we can get all of our messages into people's heads, then we win. And
So it's totalitarianism.
yeah, of course, that's what they've always been about. But
Right.
but the thing that has given me so much hope is you can't beat the biology out of people. Young men will bow and scrape and they'll not just talk about go and vote for Bernie. They will vote for Bernie. It's not like this is a joke.
Right.
They'll do it because
Right.
the peer pressure and the social proof on them is so intense. But if you leave them alone with their own money, as I said in there, they'll spend money on a game called Red Dead Redemption, which is a Western first-person shooter. Red Dead Redemption 2 came out a few months ago. $525 million.
Cowboys?
$525 million in 2 days so that millennials can play cowboys and Indians in peace.
Are there real like cowboys and Indians like in the 50s?
Yeah, they're on horses with six shooters.
That's politically correct?
No, that's why they have to go into the computer world to play it. And that's why it made $525 million in 2 days.
So you can't buy this in the store. You have
No,
to
no, no. They're not only can you buy it, they're selling it and they're making a fortune. My point is that the people that are buying this game love it so much because in this virtual world, they are allowed to play cowboys and Indians without some harpy from, Code Pink shrieking over their shoulder. They just
Okay.
they're running away, but they're running into a world that is like our world. I mentioned in there that I talked to a guy. I've been knocking this idea around for a little while now, thinking about it a lot. And I had a chance to talk, and after one of these talks about the video games, this guy came up to me, an old man, and he said he was a grandfather. He's the legal caretaker for his grandson, and he says he never sees his grandson anymore. He's just in there playing computer games all the time, and he's a former Marine, and he doesn't know what to do. He feels like he's lost his grandson. And he said, what do you recommend? And I said to him, I'd be willing to bet you pretty much everything I have that right at that moment when you're wondering where your grandson is, he's in a room looking at a computer screen trying to be you.
Wow.
He's trying to be you. He's shooting Nazis, he's parachuting out of airplanes, he's placing explosives, he's laying down suppressing fire, he's making runs for pillboxes. He's trying to be you. And he's doing it in a world where nobody gives him any grief over it because he's by himself, or he's with other people. This is really where the power is. He's playing with other friends who also have made the run away from this social justice hell that they live in. And now they go into a quiet room, they fire up whatever game it is, Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, just listen to the names of these things. Listen to the names of them.
Yeah.
Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, Battlefield, Gears of War. All of these are calling to their biology, and you can't beat that. And the left can try. They tried with a game called Battlefield 5. They tried to make a politically correct version of Battlefield.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to sell $4 billion, and it sold, I think, half a billion.
This is why I love talking with you, Bill, and I know you talk about this on BillWhittle.com, but you're interweaving philosophy, psychology, biology, and politics, all intertwined with modern day media and entertainment.
And looking forward,
Yeah.
looking forward, the project I want to do,
So yeah, please.
the project I'm working on is, I don't really want to get into the details of it. Why? Because the left will immediately take efforts to shut it down. So I'm just trying to get it privately funded.
Okay.
But basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell, again, this is so important, Dave. I don't want to be in the 2-minute attention span of education. I want to be in the 30-hour attention span of this is cool and I can't get enough of it.
Right.
Okay, so I want to tell stories using computer-generated characters set against the background of existing computer games. Don't want to do a conservative computer game. There's no conservative answer to Grand Theft Auto. There's no fully insured SUV is not going to sell a lot of copies.
It's a great name for a video game. Fully insured SUV.
So there is no such thing as a conservative computer game if you're talking about conservative values. But if you're talking about biological values, they're all conservative. Guy with a gun driving fast with a pretty girl blowing up things.
Yeah.
So I plan to use motion capture and computer-generated characters to tell a series of 5-6 minute, very visually exciting stories that have one message, and if they ever detect what the message is, then we've failed miserably. You're never going to hear the word Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. It's set 1,000 years in the future. You got dancing sex robots, you got spaceships, you got explosions, and then you have one particular action where instead of explaining something to somebody, I just show them. And this is the power of entertainment. You're hypnotized.
So what does that future look like as far as practical terms? Guy, I got 2 sons. I want to make sure that my kids are seeing good content, being educated by it at the same time. Where would I go for something? What you're talking about? What platform does that look like?
Well,
because in your mind, you've got something big.
Yeah, but
right?
But the more I think about it, the more I realize that the stuff that I want to do is important. Because there's one final step in this process, but it's the least important step. The critical step is, would millennials spend 30 hours playing a video game that they spent $60 on that was about left-wing values? And the answer is not only no, but hell no. Any intrusion of left-wing values into that world that they've made for themselves, they just run for the hills.
Right.
So my entire point is that we don't have to change their behavior. We don't have to change their minds. They're already acting like conservatives. We just have to give them permission to be that way in the real world. And giving them permission means breaking the spell of social proof. And I can sum this up very quickly. When Kanye West came out and said that he liked Donald Trump's support among African American males went from 10% to 30% in 6 days. Those are real voting numbers. It's not. That's a poll, a political poll number. So why did his support triple? Because one guy says something. Well, it's because Kanye West certainly has street cred. He's not a Republican shill, that's for sure. He criticized Bush doesn't like black people. His videos are all about he's on the side of Black Lives Matters and he's throwing bottles at policemen. So what Kanye West does is when Kanye West says, I like Donald Trump, he gives people permission to like Donald Trump, because if Kanye West likes Donald Trump and Kanye West is the coolest guy in the world, then I guess on some level it's okay to like Donald Trump. And he blows their lie up in their face because people have been told, black people in the case of Kanye, have been told that Donald Trump, that only racists support Donald Trump. Kanye West supports Donald Trump, therefore Kanye West must be a white supremacist racist.
Right.
And that's where they just, what do you mean Kanye West is a white supremacist racist? It's validation.
But has he gone quiet, or has he just been marginalized?
Well, my understanding is that the former president of the United States called him and said, you simply can't do this. And that all of his peers, a lot of his peers, I almost distinctly remember Snoop Dogg being one of the people saying, hey man, what is this BS? And it's funny, because I'm not a fan of Kanye West, at least I wasn't before this. I thought Kanye West had, and I still do, think a tremendously diseased ego. He thinks he's Jesus. But it occurred to me after this happened that only somebody who's got the ego the size of Kanye West has the ego to stand up to the peer pressure that is working against him all the time. And when people started pushing back and saying, hey, you can't say that, he said, don't you tell me what to say. Don't you tell me what to say.
By the way, Snoop Dogg, who just got all of his followers to support Louis Farrakhan, right? Who's not an anti-Semitic, of course. He's a right-wing.
Louis Farrakhan is a terrorist. But see, this is the point, though. To the degree that people went and became followers of Louis Farrakhan, they didn't do it because they liked Louis Farrakhan. They did it because they liked Snoop Dogg.
Right.
It's his credibility that made the move, not Farrakhan's. Farrakhan's been out there for 30 years. Right. So it's not like everybody suddenly said, oh, I want to be a terrorist Muslim murderer all of a sudden. The guy who they admire, who they look up to, said, you should listen to this guy. And that's criminal. Yeah. But that's the way the entire river is flowing. And when you get somebody like Kanye going the other direction,
gotcha.
Makes a difference.
Gotcha. Any projects you got working on besides, this thing in your mind right now. It sounds huge.
Well, it is, and I had to put it on hold for a little while because I had to get back to the core business at BillWhittle.com. So I do 44 shows a month.
That's amazing.
Yeah, 44 shows a month at BillWhittle.com for $9.95 a month. And if anybody's interested in becoming a citizen producer, that keeps us in the game long enough to do the rest of the stuff as they squeeze out our ad revenues and all the rest.
Right.
One thing I will say that I've learned very recently is that we have a couple thousand members, and we've had a couple of tragedies lately. One of our members, just a regular person, his wife got hit by a car, and then just a couple weeks ago, one of our fans died of cancer. And everybody pulled together, and I was getting texts from the victims or families of the victims saying, I've just never seen people like this. They're the best people that there are in the world.
The support in the community.
The members at BillWhittle.com are the best people I've ever met, and it's got nothing to do with me. They're not fans of me. They're fans of the message. They're fans of the idea. They like common sense and decency, and it's a source of incredible pride to me. But if there's somebody out there who wants to be part of that family, we certainly could use your help. And our website now allows them to post their own blog space. And I read what the members say more than I read anything else.
Real quickly as we wrap up here, BillWhittle.com, you've got the daily blog, daily video blog show. You do...
We do 5 Right Angles a week. We do 5 Bill Whittle Nows, which is a daily take on the news every week. I do a Firewall a week, which is my kind of in-depth political take on things. I just did one on understanding socialism and why it's based on envy and not compassion. And then we do 4 Stratosphere Lounge shows, which are just me just yapping to the fan base for a couple hours on Thursday
And this is where you need to go, folks, because I mean, you're not going to hear it in mainstream media. You're not going to hear it from the cable news. You have to go to these particular sources. And as we were just talking about, you got to pay for it if you want to hear it, because it's the only way people can continue providing this content. So check out BillWhittle.com.
Yeah, they've
Greatly
got
appreciate it.
the left has George Soros, 32 billion into this, and among Facebook and all the rest of them, and they've got George Soros, and we've got you. We've just got regular people who understand that they're trying to squeeze this message out, and we don't want that to happen. So any support we could get would be really appreciated.
Everything you're doing, Bill.
Thanks,
all right,
buddy.
and
Good to
great
see you
having
again.
you back on again.
Let's go we'll get a drink.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Take care.
And we'll be right back from American Freedom Alliance. Thanks again, Bill Whittle. Check him out at BillWhittle.com. We'll be right back, folks.